Ben from Alabama. You're live on Truth Wanted. What do you have for us?
Hey, hi guys. I know one thing you were talking about, like ADHD and stuff earlier. I've noticed that people with anxiety don't really talk about it as much.
Yeah,
but
maybe I don't know. I'm a pretty anxious guy, but I don't know. It is what it is.
I don't hear you talk about it that much.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
I think it's we're nervous about talking about it. But yeah, what I called in about, I guess I was wondering, because I hear, I've been listening to these shows for a number of years, and I hear a lot of fuzzy thinking from people who call in, and I kind of wonder, do they have like a different definition of what they think true means? And I guess I was also asking because, like, I think you said both of you guys used to be religious, and did you guys have a different definition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, philosophers don't have a consensus on what truth means. When philosophers talk about truth, they ask you, which one do you mean? Like there's different categories of truth, right? Like it's not an easy thing to answer. So yeah, truth is absolutely relative to the individual. Whether or not that means there's a universal or objective truth is beside the fact that people do have individual understandings of what true means. So yeah, most people, I don't know if it's fair to say most people, but a lot of people's idea of truth is thing that confirms or consorts to my bias, right? And they may not say that out loud or algorithmically, pad that out, but that's just how they operate, right? That would be a descriptive version of their truth sort of algorithm. And I think that's what we encounter a lot through these calls, right? And hopefully try to call that out. But yeah, Eli, what would you say?
I wonder if it's not so much like a different definition of truth, but different ideas about how to determine truth. Like what sort of assumptions are reasonable, for example. So we can, if we go back to like, well, it's not completely certain that the universe did or did not have a beginning, what we can say from that is, we don't know. But then I think there are people who just have a different idea of what is or is not a reasonable assumption. Like, oh, well, something must have created it. And if something must have created it, then why couldn't it be the story that we have? And those why couldn't it be really get people very, very far. And they do a lot of lifting in those conclusions, I think. But yeah, I think... like you said, Dan, I think for the most part, it's on shows like this. Yeah, the hosts. I don't do it a lot, but you guys do a good job of kind of helping people direct back to that. Like, is that really like a reliable way to determine the truth or not?
Yeah. Most people don't have that. They don't always haven't been taught good ways to find true things, whatever true might be. Really. But anyway, Ben, go ahead. You sound like you were going to say something.
Oh, yeah. 'Cause I've been thinking that I think like there's parts of people's lives where they can have like a better example of what truth means, and it's in more like the little things we do that reliably produce cause and effect. Like we have to do something for our job, or we fail at it, we don't get paid, and then we're homeless. Or even just like hobbies, when you're just making something, there's a cause and effect relationship going on there that I think is like a good example of truth. But I mean, so often I see people, we're perfectly rational in doing these little things. And then when they think about the big questions, they just throw all that logic out the window.
Yeah,
and, my own job.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I think about my own job. I work in engineering, and it's like every day I absolutely have to correctly model cause and effect, so I can get my engineering project to do what I want it to. And I try to apply the same epistemology when thinking about everything else too.
Yeah, for sure. And I have a job career that is also technical, not in engineering. But yeah, I think about that too, right? Where it's like, okay, I have to be really on point with the things I do, but that doesn't mean I can't mess up in other points of my life, right? This is a kind of truth, a logic, if you will, that I'm practiced at being in technical in my thinking, but that comes with a sort of training, right? And that you obviously have if you're in engineering, right? That other people may not have or have access to. You know, like what we understand as truth, also methods of finding truth, that is a result of privilege in some ways as well. I also used to tutor kids, and in tutoring, I specifically met with kids who came from families that were underprivileged, and typically in poverty situations. And that was an eye-opening experience for me, because that kid's entire worldview and development is almost completely brought up by their own environment, right? So how can I say that any other kid that I tutor was smarter than the kids that are there? Because, like, you know, is it really their fault, right? Like, how naturally could they have gotten to a better understanding if they were just in a different environment? How much of that is really them speaking more so than the environments that they're a part of? So I don't know. There's a lot to it, and that's why it makes me harder to judge people sometimes, because like how you gain access to knowledge and assess knowledge is a kind of a privileged thing in some ways, but a lot of times I'm just fucking angry. I'll be honest with you. I'm just mad nowadays about how people are doing things, because I trust that other adults are competent at least basic things, and they're not. And I guess we'll continue to be frustrated, but I don't know. I'm going on a tangent here. Eli, save me. Talk about, give your thoughts, perspective, please.
Ben, you mentioned how like people like in like our everyday, like our minor interactions, like I'm going to set this thing down and I know reliably that it will stay there. But then when we get to like the bigger things, people tend to just kind of get rid of that like critical thinking or that like concept of reality. And I wonder if what happens, because I think this happens for me a lot, is I will tend to underestimate my understanding of a thing before I overestimate it. Now that probably isn't true for most people, but I think that when people start to think about like the world, the universe, there's so many things out there that I don't know. Like we as like the royal we as a planet understand about 5% of the universe, and the individual person's probably a much smaller percentage of that. So when they think about all the things that they don't know, they're like, well, yeah, why couldn't something fantastical or something that I don't see happen here every day, why couldn't something different exist elsewhere? And that's not a bad thought to have, but then you also have to be like, okay, well, do I have a reason to think that exists? And that's where people don't get to that step.
Right. Ignorance is almost a launching point for the speculation, because you're utilizing what you don't know as possibility. Yeah.
And sometimes those ideas are fun. Like they're really fun to explore. And then you just like think like, yeah, I want that to be true. And it's just a fun thought. And then that's just where you
and
went.
then some ideas you build a religion out of. But yeah, it's just my take. I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I like fiction as much as the next person, but it's I mean, you find it interesting. It's like there's a big inconsistency in how people are taught to apply logic and critical thinking. It's like, if you're just sticking your nose to the grindstone, doing your job of whatever it is, be logical and critical and doing that correctly, but just throw it out the window with everything else. And, I think a lot of that is taught, like you're right. You do have to have like a, upbringing where you're taught things like critical thinking or science classes and stuff to start trying to apply it generally. But, even when you're just told, hey, go do the dishes, you gotta figure out how to not leave bits of stuff on the plates or soap on the plates. And to do that, you have to apply, rigorously true ideas. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah. I mean, so like, if there's one thing I learned from my teaching job, it's that material conditions are the greatest indicator for somebody's academic success, right? More so than IQ or any other kind of identifier. It's material conditions. When you think about, oh, but what about like people from history that have contributed, these great and amazing thinkers? Like, you know, they don't have the same technology and stuff today. If you actually look at history, for a lot of these figures, Isaac Newton, for example, came from a wealthy background. Like, he had the ability to pursue the stuff they did because there was money there. Same thing with a lot of natural philosophers of their time. They tend to be some of the wealthiest people of their time also. Like, there is an intimate link there, and that should give us pause, because if it truly is, if our ability to reason is so intimately tied with our material conditions, then what does that say with how we should treat one another, right? What does that say about how we should continue to develop ourselves and talk to other people about the things that we do? How do we fix that? I get angry, right? And I get mad at folks, but like, I am also very privileged in a sense as well. I went to a pretty great public school, and I have a benefit of a college education, and that has like intimately informed my worldview. So what about for those who didn't have that? How can I really judge them the same way? I don't know. It makes it really difficult.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that's tough for me to remember, is that you never know somebody else's experience or what's going on, or like how they arrived at their conclusion until they tell you. And I do get angry sometimes, and usually once you end up talking, like, it's the thing everybody always says, once you talk to someone and figure out why they believe what they believe, like, it's kind of hard to be angry at that point. You might still disagree, but if you actually understand why they believe it, there's no reason to be angry.